Okay. All right. I'm sorry. Would you introduce yourselves to our church this morning?
My name is Suzanne Abel.
And I'm Wolf Bushkin.
Okay. And it may look like I'm sitting here in the dentist office, which I do need to get to the dentist. We're here because you are a forensic anthropologist.
Correct.
And you are a dentist, but you have also taken the same courses. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
But for local law enforcement, these are cases of forensic interest, which means that they're recent deaths.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so you provide evidence for law enforcement as they're building their case.
I give them sort of information. It's called a biological profile, where we can look at the skeleton and determine various things like sex, age, ancestry, individualizing traits, and any kind of trauma. And I give that information to the coroners, and then they can use that to try to figure out who the person is. Mainly comparing it to a missing person's file.
Okay. And then, as we discussed earlier, both of you have actually gone, was it to Egypt? Is that?
In Egypt, we looked at, we were studying class differences, would you say. We worked for, actually excavated a cemetery, 5,000-year-old pre-dynastic cemetery, so that was all before the pharaohs. Mm-hmm. And ours was a lower class cemetery where they actually buried them in the ground, as opposed to some of the upper class tombs and above ground burials. So we were able to see the kind of mortuary practices they had, the kind of grave goods they had, cultural relics such as the blankets they buried them with, the pots they buried them with. In a couple of cases there was, I believe, some remnants of the things in the pots. Wasn't there seeds?
There were some artifacts associated with that site. It was important mainly because of its age, because it was pre-dynastic, before the state of Egypt was even developed. And it was the heyday of the site. And also because the remains were in such a wonderful state of preservation, mainly because of the dry Egyptian sands, the weather. And this was before the time of mummification process like we know it.
Right.
Where they used, oils and unguents and the myrrh and all these kinds of things, palm oils to mummify. This was before that time. It was mainly natural mummification, which was so important about that site.
Okay. Mm-hmm. You would have had some information to lead you to that site. Is that correct?
Some information. Archaeological information?
No. Something would have led you to this site to understand what you were examining.
There was a survey. The first part of archaeology is to survey the site. When you walk over, you do reconnaissance, aerial, you walk over, you map the thing, map the place. And what happened with this cemetery was that it was being sort of desecrated by some local farmers who were cutting a trench through it so that they could irrigate their crops, cutting a trench directly from the Nile. And it was a sugarcane, I think, they were trying to grow. And as they were digging the irrigation canal, they were digging the bones. And some of the local folks, the local archaeologists caught wind of that and recognized the importance of that burial, of the cemetery. Enormous, huge, about 2,000 people buried there. And recognized the importance that it was pre-dynastic and that it needed to be preserved. So it was salvage archaeology for us, pretty much.
And a lot of that actually comes about in the state. If they're putting in a road and they'll find cultural remains or even human remains, everything has to stop. They have to find an anthropologist to actually determine whether or not that's a contemporary site or a pre-dynastic site or a archaeological site. And there's various things. If it's a historic cemetery, they can move it. If it's archaeological, it goes to salvage archaeology, where they just take it all out so that you continue building the strip mall or the road or whatever it is that they're doing.
When archaeology is supported or supports biblical claims, that doesn't prove that God exists. It doesn't prove that
it's not addressing that question.
Right.
It shouldn't, at least.
Right, and it doesn't prove that, like for our series, that Jesus is the Son of God. Sure. It doesn't prove that. But when we see different places, different people, and you see that the location, you see that the names all line up with what's in Scripture, would that make the Bible more credible in its claims?
I think so. If you have correct evidence for it, why not? It's an historical event, just like any other event. Just as important, though, that it doesn't disprove it.
Right. Okay. Some of the stuff you do for Charleston County and reviewing, you also examine, you scientifically examine, but and draw conclusions, but you don't come up with a verdict. Is that correct?
No, that's not my place. No.
Right. And so we can do the same thing with biblically speaking, as we examine scientific evidence. Again, we're not coming up with a verdict in that respect either. Is that correct?
That's correct. My job is to merely present the evidence, to present information that would help local law enforcement come to their own conclusions. We would talk about cause, manner of death. I may assist them in determining cause of death, but it's not my place at all.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Nice talking to
And we lost her husband midway through the interview, but we thank him as well. And if you are looking for a dentist, they have started a new practice over in West Ashley, Wolf Dentistry.